I'm talking today with Clive Matson. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. How are you?
Okay. Were you surprised by and what did it mean to you to receive acknowledgement, Beat Generation Beat Poet Laureate 2021 lifetime?
Was I surprised?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was stunned. It's a great honor, especially since I've gone away from the beats in my social life, but not in my writing.
Mhm.
And there are people who are playing with the beat identity and making hay with it, or fighting with the academics, and I've just stayed away from all that.
Yeah. Um, so I read that in 1959, you heard Ginsberg read How.
Mhm.
It somehow transformed something in your mind because your life seemed to have changed drastically. Would you tell me about that?
Well, I grew up on an avocado ranch in Southern California, and I got a full scholarship to the University of Chicago, and I was just so excited to do that. And I went, and what Chicago was doing was they Hutchinson had been their great educator for many years, and he set up a program where incoming students have to take tests to pass a series of humanity courses in humanity. And I got into an advanced course, and I sat in the back row of the room. That's where they put the country boys. And we were reading Milton's Paradise Lost, and I loved it. And the professor asked, "Well, why did Milton write this poem?" And I rose my hand, and he knew I'd only raised my hand once or twice in the semester, so he picked on me. And I said, "Well, life is full of these issues, good against evil, and he wanted to lay it all out for us." And the professor, bless his heart, said, "Oh, that's a good answer, but it's not the one I'm looking for." And the answer he wanted was that Milton was having a quarrel with the King of England, and in Paradise Lost, uh, Satan was him, and the king and God was the King of England. So that's why Satan is such a sympathetic character in that book,
Mhm.
because it was the author, and he was winning a lot of the battles with the Lord.
Well, what was it about Ginsberg that caused you to sort of drop out of college and go west or do something different?
Well, it wasn't really Ginsberg; it was the whole scene.
Uh,
While I was there, Irving Rosenthal was the editor of the Chicago Review, and he loved the beats. And he wrote to Ginsberg and said, "Send me the poem I can put in my journal." And Ginsberg told Irving what he said many editors. He said, "I'll send you something, but if you print mine, you also have to print something from Gregory Corso, Diane de Prima, Edward Dahlberg, just a whole list of beats." And Irving did it. He loved Ginsberg. He loved all the writers. And of course, the University of Chicago administration had to look at a proof of the journal before they let him do it. And they looked at it and they said, "Irving, you can't do this." And Irving looked back at them, picked up all his papers and said, "Yes, I can." And he took the journal off campus and it became Big Table, the first issue of Big Table. Have you heard of that journal? It's in
Probably
the,
in passing, but
yeah, it's a big deal at that time. We're talking 1959. And uh, I didn't know this at the time, but I was playing ping pong in the dorm with a guy who was clued into the literary world. He said, "You got to come to this reading. There's a big reading happening." And what Irving had done was done the book launch for the once known Chicago Review, the Big Table book launch at oh, what's the name of the place? Gate of Horn in Chicago, and it's a big music hall. And I went there with my ping pong friend and listened to the beats. One of the prominent ones at the reading was Gregory Corso. And I asked him, there's 200 people in the hall, and I'm at the back, and raised my hand. I asked Corso who his influences were. And he went through the canon: Shakespeare, Milton, uh, the Greeks, Herodotus, and Sappho. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, he's lying. He's not saying what his personal influences are. And then as soon after I had digested the reading, I realized he was not lying. He was telling the truth about the Beats' influences. They had studied literature and listened and noticed what made it powerful and when people related to it. And they got up on stage and they were passionate and loud and honest, and you could understand every word. And that was about a 180 degree left turn from what I was getting at the University of Chicago. That Milton was writing that Paradise Lost because he was having a quarrel with the King of England is more or less reducing literature to gossip. You know, what you learn in the academies is gossip about what they wrote and why they wrote it. Where on stage, the uh, the Beats were communicating with the audience. They were more or less saying, "This is me. I'm talking to you. Talk back to me." And the stuff that we were learning at the University of Chicago, well, Steve Cowett pointed it out in his essay, "The Mystique of the Difficult Poem." You read the poems that the university was was putting out at the top of the list, you can't understand them. And it's more or less saying, uh, you don't know who I am, and you're going to have to figure it out. That's for me to know and you to figure out. So it was quite wonderful. It took me years to digest how stark the difference was between the academies and the Beats. But yes, it's you could look at my life and say, well, you were chasing the Beats the whole while. No, I wasn't. They were chasing me. It's like that the appeal of somebody being honest and communicating so that you can understand them and talking from the depths of their soul, that's attractive.
That's kind of the best sort of definition of what beat poetry is, I've heard actually. People
Yeah.
sort of grapple with that and don't come up with much, but that's a good definition. So how and when did you meet Herbert Huncke and what did he mean to you?
Herbert Huncke was my mentor in life. So I dropped out of University of Chicago, went back home and worked on the ranch for a while. And my parents were really upset with me and said, we got to enroll you at the University of California. And after a year on the ranch, I went to University of California, and the my roommate, let's see, I was at University of California, Riverside. My roommate knew a girl who I got involved with, and I looked like a bad boy to her. She wanted to go to Europe and go with me, and I just left and went with her and traveled over Europe. But I had no money to get there. So what I had done was I left the ranch, went back to New York, talked to people, and found that you could work your way to Europe on a freighter, and they were hard to catch out of New York, but you could get them easily from Montreal. So I got out on the New York freeway and hitchhiked to Montreal, and Ed Dorn picked me up, and we got into a conversation. Well, no, it was not. It was not Ed Dorn. It was what was his name? Fred Chalmers. Is that right? I think Fred Chalmers picked me up, and he was the brother-in-law of Ed Dorn's wife. His sister had married Ed Dorn. Ed Dorn is one of the Beats. And we started talking just like this. And he said, well, the Beats are reading at the 8th Street Coffee House or the 10th Street Coffee House, was it? Or 12th Street. I think it was the 10th Street Coffee House on the Lower East Side. And his sister was going to be there, and he said, "You should come and hear them." So I went to this reading at the coffee house, and it was lower key than the big reading at Gate of Horn, but it was you could see the people and talk to them. And I went around and got names and addresses. I got Irving Rosenthal's address and phone number, and I got Diane Prima's phone number. And I continued my hitchhiking up to Montreal and got to Europe. Met my girlfriend. We traveled all over Europe, and I came back to New York. And the first thing I did was call the people that I had met at that reading. A pretty marvelous reading. James Waring was there in reading. He was the dancer associated with the Beats. And Ed Dorn was there and read some poems.
Well, when did you meet Herbert Huncke?
Well, I called Irving and I hung out with him for a while. And we were talking about all the Beats who were on the Lower East Side and Beat Generations. Irving really loved John Wieners, and he'd read John Wieners to me, and we'd talk about that. And then he'd talk about people around. He said, "Well, some of these people are not good." He said, you should stay away from some of them. And one of them is Herbert Huncke. And Herbert Huncke was a junkie, and he would make friends with people. And then the next thing, you'd find out that the people he made friends with were in jail or in recovery or were dead or had done overdose. And I looked at him kind of cross-eyed, but I listened and hung out with Irving for a couple of months, and then hung out with Diane Prima for a while. And along the way, I met Herbert Huncke on the street. And what was remarkable about Huncke was how well he knew people. And within, not 5 minutes, but within 30 seconds or so, he'd addressed me as a person that he respected. And I just was like stunned by that. I've used that word twice now. Here's a person in the Beat generation who treated me with respect, whereas Irving treated me like somebody who didn't know nothing about nothing, and he was going to tell me how to live. That didn't work real well. And at the time, I had left Irving's and Diane Prima's place, and I'd gotten gotten an apartment on St. Mark's Place and Avenue A, and I was there with my girlfriend. And Huncke would come up, and he was staying with somebody a couple of streets over, and he liked to eat sandwiches, and I liked to eat sandwiches. So he'd come over and he'd be hungry. So we'd make sandwiches and eat them and talk. And then we'd take off and hang around the streets for a while. My girlfriend loved marijuana, so Huncke would bring some marijuana and they'd smoke. Sometimes I'd smoke with them. But Huncke treated me like somebody he wanted to know. So, and I could talk to him.
So,
That was kind of priceless at those times, and it's priceless now. You're talking to me. People who can talk to each other is a blessing.
So in 1978, you were asked to teach a writing workshop. And first you were maybe hesitant about it or something, but someone told you to approach it a certain way, like editor, writer, and child. Would you tell me something about that and how that got you going, how and enjoying teaching and continuing till now?
Exactly. I love teaching. It was wonderful. Well, so along the way, I met Michael Daly, who also was influenced by the Beats. And I'm in Berkeley at this point, and he knew about a writing festival in Washington, and we hitchhiked up to the writing festival and see if I can remember the names. We hiked up there. We met Gary Snyder there. I had dinner with him and a bunch of people and watched. There was sort of a mixture in that festival. And somebody from Port Angeles, who taught at Port Angeles, Jack Estes, kept in touch with the festival. And he invited me over. He said, "Come and give a reading and teach a workshop." just like that. And I said, well, I'd love to read for your classes. He was teaching writing at the state school in Port Angeles. I said, but I have no classroom experience. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. It's easy. You just do what David Wagner did a couple of months ago. He talked to the students and he showed them the scheme where you divide this writer's psyche into the editor, the writer, and the child. And so I taught the class, and it was amazing that people could identify with that. The editor is like the super ego. It's a Freudian split of the psyche. That's the part that judges you and pushes you to be better and analyzes everything. That's that's the super ego. The writer is the ego. That's the one that kind of holds everything together. And the child is the unconscious, and that's where the source of the writing is. And the exercise to give was to tell the editor and the writer to go take a nap or go for a walk and let the child write whatever it wants. And that was stunning. It worked. Everybody wrote, and they wrote interesting things. It's like uh, there are a lot of birthday parties and cotton candy and cake and games and throwing the ball and kid stuff. But it was a turn on. So I came back down to Berkeley, and my friend John Oliver Simon, also who was influenced by the Beats, had been teaching for several years and he was ready to quit. He said, well, why don't you? We got into a conversation. I told him what had happened. He said, well, why don't you take over my classes? So I took them over. There's just a few people who meet in his house, and I invited them over to the place where I was staying. And we started doing the classes, and I kept getting the same exercise from David Wagner and getting the same results: jump rope, cotton candy, birthday parties. And we started thinking, I would talk with them. I said, is this what we want to do, or is there something else to write? And we thought, well, maybe we should tell the editor and writer to go away and let the wise child write. There was something else we tried too, and they didn't work so well. Somebody else was doing a painting class that had wild child in it, and things got a little better with that. But then we tried, let's not go halfway. Let's tell the editor and the writer to go off somewhere and let the crazy child write. And that opened the doors because there's nothing limited to what a crazy person might do. So suddenly people were writing things with much more energy and intelligence and wildness. So we stuck with that. And that turned into the book, Let the Crazy Child Write, which New World Library published in, I think, 1996. Is that right? Somewhere in there.
Would you like to say something about Wordswell?
Wordswell.
What does it say? Words. Yeah, Wordswell.
Wordswell, you got it right. Absolutely. Well, after a few years, well, now we're talking 2010, 2012, some of my students wanted to start a magazine. And so we brainstormed. We thought they'd all done the Crazy Child exercise and had been in the classes and written a lot. And so we brainstormed what sort of name did we want? And this is what we came up with. Wordswell is the name of the journal. And they've now they're doing their 6th issue. And you can find it at wordswell.org. Just all one word, wordswell.org. And we like that name because it's what the crazy child does. It's like a swelling of words that comes up from your unconscious after you've told the writer who knows how to write to go away, and the editor who knows how to edit things to go away. And this kind of energy might come up. It's just like a swelling of creativity and originality and wildness and energy. So Wordswell seemed like a good title for us.
Well, after the wild child writes, do you invite the editor and writer back to clean it up, or you just let the wild child stand by itself? Okay.
You can come and change the writing. Absolutely. We will edit them, but
Mhm.
not from the perspective of the we'll edit them the way the what do we say now that addresses just what you asked? We now say that the writing that you do will tell you how it needs to be edited. So you don't come into the editing with an outside perspective. You come from an inside perspective. Oh, this is what I wrote down. And that's pretty interesting. I do want to say something like that. Now, what exactly do I want to say? And you listen to it and change the words so that you're saying exactly what you want to say or what the child wants to say.
Do you have a poem to read to us or to recite?
Excuse me?
You have a poem to read? A poem?
Do I have a poem for you?
Mhm.
Well, what would you like? How much time do we have?
Oh, one piece, something you really love, not, a page or a little more or so, whatever you love.
Okay. Well, this is the book that the National Beat Poetry Foundation is publishing. Hello, Paradise, Paradise, Goodbye. And you're affiliated with them.
Yeah, I'm with Texas. I'm
Say
a
again?
I'm a current Beat Point Laureate of Texas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. So, Deb Kincaid and Paul Richmond.
I mean, Deborah Kilday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kildare, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't know them personally, but yes, I run into them when we've worked together through the internet. Yeah. And
Mhm.
we've read on the same broadcast through them a couple of times. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's not been recently, a year or two ago. So I've seen you. We've been on the same reading. But there were
Uh-huh.
so many. There were so many people.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. It's a
so
big organization.
um you did get fall into the drug experimentation in your youth, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that had something to do with parting ways with some of the beats, wasn't it? True.
Well, part of Ginsberg's conversation would be something like this. Here, you want some? Or looking around for a needle. But as a mentor, he was there. We wondered how to put our poems together, and he would say, "Use your breath. You end your lines at the end of your breath." And of course, he got that from Charles Olson, who composed entirely in that manner. Um, so, as far as a mentor of techniques, Ginsberg was terrific. But the dope, I did a lot of dope for a while, and I loved acid and heroin, but I grew away from it. It's like I wanted to be my own writer. I didn't want to write what the dope told me to write.
Mhm.
I think that's close to what you asked. Okay,
Mhm.
so I can read a section from the book that's coming out,
Okay.
and if it goes on too long, just tell me.
Well, let's say 3 minutes, something about 3 minutes or so.
3 minutes. Okay, I'll have to read something else because that's more like
Yeah.
8 or 10. One of the poems that people like is from the book Hourglass, and it's called The Peacock. The peacock drags its tail behind, and string-like feathers drape the ground until a threat or mating urge alerts the muscles in its spine. Rustle, try. Rows of turquoise eyes arch up and out, their rims green-brown, their cores blue-black. In one long surge, the tail bends straight, its colors shine. 90 allies stare from the fan without a blink. What sense can tell if they're for show or if they're real? The peacock struts. See this? See that? An inner mind has touched each cell, and each one blossoms with an eye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love talking with you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
All
Good
righty.
talking to you too.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.